How rich is Dana White? Well, Dana White is worth more than $400 million, and that was before he got slapped across his pine-fresh bald head. You might remember Dana White for turning the UFC into an iconic global brand, or the time he kissed Tito Ortiz on the lips. Born in Manchester, Connecticut, Dana was an extremely tough individual. Growing up, he moved around often and eventually settled in Maine. During his early teenage years, Dana White completely fell in love with the sport of boxing, and eventually quit his job as a valet driver, in order to pursue a career in the fight business. Dana White attended Bishop Gorman High in Vegas, but spent his senior year in Marie, where he graduated from Herman High. Upon receiving his diploma, Dana White started fighting in the amateur scene, and slowly racked up 33 wins and 4 losses as a middleweight. But while training for a Golden Gloves bout, he suffered injuries to his elbow and nose, which ultimately derailed his boxing career. Not planning on wasting time, Dana White decided to move to Boston in order to study at the University of Massachusetts. After 2 years, he dropped out and launched his boxing fitness classes, which became a hit all across the United States. Dana's business was doing so well, the neighborhood mob wanted a piece of it. Not knowing what to do next, Dana White moved to Las Vegas. He eventually got in touch with his Vegas classmate known as Lorenzo Fertitta, who had become a multi-millionaire in the casino business. While in Las Vegas, Dana White started training small fighters, and eventually got the chance to manage Tito Ortiz and Chuck the Iceman. When he got the opportunity to go to a UFC event, Dana's mind exploded with ideas. He soon found out the company was going out of business and contacted his childhood friend. Within 30 days, Zufar was formed, 9% share going to Dana White, 81% to the Fertitta brothers, and 10% share to another party. In January 2001, Zufar bought the UFC for $2 million, and shortly after, Dana White was made president, with a starting salary of $500,000. A year later, the newly bought UFC headlined their first major event, in front of a sold-out crowd at MGM Grand, which turned the UFC from an underground brand into a potential mainstream success story. 3 years after making the initial purchase, the UFC had already lost $34 million. But in 2004, Dana White along with the Fertitta brothers had an idea for a UFC TV show. In 2005, Spike aired a new television series, called The Ultimate Fighter, only after the UFC paid the $10 million production cost. Following Season 1 of The Ultimate Fighter, UFC 52 pay-per-view buys doubled, almost 300,000 people tuned in to watch. Shortly after, on UFC 57, the pay-per-view numbers increased once again, this time to 410,000 pay-per-view buys, resulting in a salary raise for Dana White. He now made $5 million a year as the president of the company. As the UFC approached its 100th event, the organization's popularity continued to soar. In 2009, UFC 100 headlined at the Mandalay Bay. 1.6 million people from around the world bought the pay-per-view event, and things only got bigger. A year later, in 2010, Dana White received yet another raise, this time to $12 million a year for his presidential responsibilities. The momentum rolled with the UFC as big fights continued to take place. In 2012, the UFC hosted the largest event in North American history. 55,000 people were in attendance, and it generated just over $11 million in sales. After 16 years, Dana White along with the Fertitta brothers sold the UFC for $4 billion to a company out of Beverly Hills, but the decision to keep Dana White as the company's president was an easy choice. Dana White's 9% share turned out to be a $300 million payday, and he is still raking in $17 million a year as the president of the UFC. Currently Dana White lives in a big-ass mansion in Las Vegas, owns a brand new Ferrari, along with a handful of classic cars. Just a fun fact. Dana and I have been friends for years. When he first moved to Vegas, it was none other than your boy Alfred, who advised Dana to sleep at my Vegas mansion without any worries. As a sign of his gratitude, Dana White told me about the UFC being sold for $2 million. I immediately went to the safe and gave him $1 million. 2 days later I find out, Dana bought the UFC with the Fertitta brothers, and Alfred's million in cash is nowhere to be found. In conclusion, Dana White is making more money, buying more nice things, and paying the UFC fighters with more breadcrumbs than you and I combined. Don't forget to subscribe for more, because Dana White and I are kicking it. Just a message to all my viewers, please subscribe to my new channel, Alfred Reads the News. We will have a lot more fun there as well.